All right, I'm going to go ahead and call the Montgomery County Board of Supervisors special meeting for Monday, March 18th, 2024 to order at this time. And our first item is we're going to have a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance led by our County Administrator, Ms. Hill.
Please rise as you're able for a moment of silence, and then I will lead us in the pledge. Let us pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Okay. All right, welcome everyone. Our next item of business is public address, and we do have an individual signed up. And I'm going to go ahead and read our guidelines for public address. We want to welcome everyone, and this is a time for our citizens to present comments on issues related to the county. A sign-up sheet is available before the meeting for citizens to sign up to speak. Following the speakers that have signed up, members from the audience may address the board. All comments must be directed to the chair and the board from the speaker's podium at the front of the room. It is our time to listen to your concerns. The board does not reply to questions during this time. Please state your name and where you reside when you come to the podium. You will have 4 minutes to speak either as an individual or a representative. At the end of 3 minutes, you will see a yellow reminder light appear on the box on the podium. At 4 minutes, a red light will signal that your time is up. Speakers may leave any written statements and/or information for the board with the board clerk. Speakers will be judged out of order should they engage in personal attacks, use profanity or abusive language, or debate with the audience. During public address, we ask the audience to please be respectful of the speaker's time by not applauding or interrupting. And at this time, we do have an individual that signed up, and that is Mr. Wayman Pack, and you may come forward at this time. Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Wayman Pack. I live on Piney Woods Road in Reiner. And to quote Yogi Berra, it's deja vu all over again. This board was presented with a proposed 75-cent per $100 tax rate, with the option of approving a 70 to 75-cent rate during the fiscal year 2024 budgeting process. During that time, there did not seem to be any consensus for compromise on the issue, with some members wanting to set the rate at the lower end and others at the highest. Here we are again, a year later, looking at the same request for 75-cent rate. While the Governor and General Assembly's proposed budgets may look favorable, let us remember they are only proposals. There is no agreed-upon final state budget. Who at this time knows what the final state funding levels will be with the Governor and General Assembly and opposing parties? While I have no issue with staffing levels, supporting our schools, personnel raises, and other items, I do have an issue with what seems to be an attempt to get a burden that wasn't approved last year placed on the county residents this year. As a retired citizen of the county, I can assure you that I did not receive a 5% increase in my income as recommended for all county employees for an allocation of $1.9 million. This seems to be in addition to an additional $500,000 inclusion in special contingencies to cover funding for possible health insurance increases for employees. My health insurance premiums also increase, but I did not receive any additional funds to cover them. As stated on page 16 of the budget summary, this proposed increase is 7.14% over the 2024 fiscal budget. The inflation rate over the past 12 months for the country was 3.15% at the end of February 2024, according to the latest U.S. Consumer Price Index report. And the interest rates on the county's deposits look to remain 0.5% higher than originally projected. As I stated during this process last year, I am respectfully requesting that this board compromise on a tax rate between our current rate and the rate proposed in this budget to allow time for the incomes of the citizens of the county who are not county employees and will not receive a 5% raise this year to catch up with your request. If you will all remember, that rate was passed was revenue neutral. I understand that we cannot stay in this mode, but you may also recall that this action was enacted because of a large increase in property values after the last reassessment. And the then majority of the board did not want to place such a heavy financial burden on the citizens. I don't understand the reasoning behind the thinking that 1 year's time would make the citizens able to bear the burdens at this juncture. While I am all for education and an educated citizenry, the funding for our county schools has increased over $12 million in the past 5 years. That is slightly over 24% in 5 years. At the same time, while I recognize that new construction and improvements have been undertaken, this particular budget line item accounts for 69% of the total $254.6 million proposed budget. As it has been stated, $1 million here and $1 million there, and soon you're talking about real money. I urge this board to carefully consider this tax increase before making a final decision, because this is real money. Are you positive that the citizens can afford it, or will tax delinquencies increase? Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come forward at this time? Okay, come on up, sir.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Aronkoff. I live in the Montgomery County area called Childress. And thank you for the opportunity to address the Board of Supervisors this evening. I simply want to be recognized as a family that opposes an increase in property taxes. The bleeding of family financial resources needs to stop. We're all experiencing it. It has to stop somewhere. And Montgomery County has had the privilege of great budgets in the past and increases. And the constituents of Montgomery County are being taxed in so many different ways, whether it's actual taxes or just at the grocery stores, etc. So somewhere the bleeding has to stop. So I ask that the Board of Supervisors finds a way to utilize the same tax budget that you had last year. That's what I have to do, and that's what most constituents of Montgomery County have to do. We got to use the same income that we had last year. It's an adequate amount of money. Find a way to preserve it and use it, and not add the concept of solving every problem by increasing taxes and spending money is a fool's errand. And we got to be careful with that. And so I ask that this county would consider not increasing the budget. We have to do this in our families, make ends meet with the same amount of funding that we had in 2023. I'm asking that you do the same thing. Thank you for this honor of being able to address you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come forward? Come on up. Welcome.
Chris Waltz, 1370 Rigby Street. I'm a resident of Christiansburg, and as it is now, I don't get my money's worth out of what you charge me for my taxes now. I have some hope with Mr. Kitts coming here. I think he actually realizes that he lives in Christiansburg and that he has a district he's supposed to represent, unlike his predecessor. But you won't even pay for the SROs for the schools, which are your responsibility. And you can sit there and try and BS everybody and say, oh, well, jurisdiction. Last speeding ticket I got was in the corporate limits of Christiansburg by a Montgomery County Sheriff's deputy. You have jurisdiction. You own the schools. Pay for the SROs. You want to raise taxes for the school system? The biggest waste in our school systems are the administrators that you pay too much money for, and they don't do a very good job. It's not the teachers. We have a park. You spent over $12 million on parks last year in the county. You didn't spend anything on Christiansburg. And you say, oh, well, we didn't authorize that park. No, but the county tourism and the tourism director which thank God we're getting out of that in the town of Christiansburg, is employed by the county, and they have the responsibility for the day-to-day operations of that. And they were out trying to sell everybody on the park. And I seem to remember something about the schools going, oh, well, we're not going to let Christiansburg Rec use the soccer fields at the schools anymore. Maybe y'all should build that park. So, I mean, one of the administrators came to a Christiansburg meeting of the Planning Commission and talked about if we wanted to see crappy schools, we could come look at the school district he came from up in Northern Virginia. I think it was in the Richmond area. And he was high up in that. And he talked about how crappy that school system was. And you hired him to be an administrator for our school system. You all are just, you're lost. And I don't know how to fix it. But you definitely don't need to raise our taxes. Are you talking about bringing back the merchant's capital tax? I seem to remember you getting rid of that, and that was a couple of $1 million. No, you're just going to raise everybody's taxes, what, 7 cents, 5 cents? Or you haven't decided yet? And you don't even know what the budget is going to be that's passed in Virginia. And if I'm not mistaken, fiscal years in Virginia run July 1st to June 30th. So you have until June to set tax rates and everything else. So why are you trying to rush it through now? That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come forward?
Joanne Price, Blacksburg, Virginia. I am going to talk about my personal experience with taxes in Montgomery County. Now, as a result of the assessment, my house payment went up $300 per month because I have an escrow deficit. In addition to that, that was from the prior assessment, it's 87.9% increase. There's also 3.9% jump in gas prices because of inflation. And this comes directly from the Board of Labor Statistics. 3.8% jump in my food and energy, which all of us are experiencing. There's a 3.9% in all other necessities. Now, these are not just things I want to go out and do. These are necessities. So I'm looking at a 99.5% increase. Now, from the time I bought my house in 1970, that's an accumulated 699.8% increase in my house because of inflation. Inflation is cumulative. We are all experiencing horrendous inflation. Now, these increases are based on inflation, not the value of my house. Now, I'm not opposed to paying certain taxes, but taxes really are constitutionally illegal. The Declaration of Independence says that I have an unalienable right to pursue happiness, the right of life, liberty, and happiness. How many of you know that people are not happy? They cannot pursue happiness. Most people are taking a second job to make up the difference so that they can pay the existing taxes that we are experiencing, let alone a tax increase. I'm not opposed to education, but I am opposed to funding failing schools. Right now, in Montgomery County, we have so many disciplinary issues that the schools are unsafe. Number two, elementary enrollment is way down. 8% of people now, parents are homeschooling their kids. That's a sign. Free lunches are up to 28%. And there are some parents that with a tax increase, you're going to put them over the limit to where they're not going to be able to feed their kids. So you're going to increase the burden on the school lunch program. More has been spent on mental health and school lunch than on education. So that tells us that there's significantly something wrong with our schools. There's taxes on fixed income, medicine, food, and how about those people who are on fixed income that have to make a choice paying the taxes or losing their homes. So you're going to see foreclosures, you're going to see homes being lost because people cannot pay the taxes. That is not the American way. In other words, we don't own our homes anymore. Because even if we pay them off and we don't have a mortgage, guess what happens? If we miss paying the taxes, you own our homes. You come and take them. So this is not liberty, life, and happiness. So taxpayers want a seat at the table, just like the union came in and said, we need a seat at the table. Taxpayers need a seat at the table. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Price. Would anyone else like to come forward at this time?
Good evening, Board. My name is Kim Bowman, and I'm a citizen of Christiansburg. I volunteer a lot of my time at a local nonprofit as director, and I can say that we have seen well over a 200% increase from the same time last year in people coming in for free food and clothing and diapers for their children. We are seeing a horrible increase in the amount of homelessness with families and elderly. And it's more than I can help, it's more than I can bear. But I'm telling you that families cannot continue to bear the load of our decisions. And we must think about it more carefully and with that in mind, because some people are barely hanging on and some people have already fell off the cliff. And we have no way to really help those people. So please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come forward?
Good evening. My name is Bob Beard. I live here in Christiansburg. I start off with a quote from Ronald Reagan. When a business or an individual spends more than it makes, it goes bankrupt. When government does it, it sends you the bill. And when government does it for 40 years, the bill comes in two ways: higher taxes and inflation. Make no mistake about it, inflation is a tax and not by accident. We are $34 trillion in debt. $1 trillion is 1,000 billion. A million times a million is a trillion. Who's going to pay for all this debt? What is the county plan for the market correction? A quote from George Washington: the last official act of any government is to loot the treasury. My question is, what does loot the treasury mean? It means loot the taxpayer. All this spending means lack of money, means the loss of freedom. Fewer and fewer things we can do. Buying a home, living the American dream is now becoming closer to a nightmare. Our society is one step closer to communism. The proposed county budget is resulting in a 7% tax increase for all of us, which includes 11% increase for MCPS with declining enrollment. There's enough unanswered questions, inconsistencies with MCS budget, you probably could sink the Titanic again. In the name of transparency and inclusion, do not vote on a tax increase tonight. Give the taxpayers of this county a seat at the table, hold an open forum to discuss in detail the Montgomery County budget. The Montgomery County budget is giving over $2 million to local nonprofits with taxpayer money. The Board of Supervisors is deciding which nonprofits gets money and not the marketplace. Why? Reminds me of a Ronald Reagan quote: government always finds a need to for whatever money it gets. Elections have consequences. There are now 5 Democrats on the Board of Supervisors. For the previous 8 years with the Republican majority, there was no property tax increases and no MCPS budget cuts. Since 2014, MCPS budget has increased 38%, greatly outpacing inflation. Inflation is hurting the county. Net revenue growth was a little over $2 million. If you count the inflation, that is negative growth. Your solution is, let's raise taxes and spend more. Let's take money away from Montgomery County taxpayers and give to a select few. Is the government protecting the government? All government workers, including teachers, are getting a 5% pay raise. Besides government workers, who else is getting a 5% pay raise? My household didn't get it. One doesn't have personal freedom with rocket high inflation and out of control spending. My wife asked, like many others, I'm sure, what have we got to do without in order to pay these increases in taxes? Our utility bills are going up 11%. Groceries seem to cost more and more and continue to grow. Since Joe Biden took office, our inflation's up 17%. You know, thousands of Virginia Tech students vote locally but do not pay local taxes, property taxes. Virginia Tech Foundation owns revenue-generating properties but does not pay taxes. How does the marketplace compete with against such advantages? A Thomas Jefferson quote: "A private central bank issuing the public currency is a greater menace to the liberties of the people than a standing army. We must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt. The Fed is printing an endless supply of fiat currency. The issue today is the same as it's been throughout all of history: whether man shall be allowed to govern himself or be ruled by a small elite." That's a quote from Thomas Jefferson. The lack of money means the loss of freedom. Fewer and fewer things we can do. In the name of transparency and inclusion, do not vote on a tax increase tonight. Give the taxpayers of the county a seat at the table. Hold an open forum to discuss the Montgomery County budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come up at this time? Welcome.
Thank you. My name is Darlinda McChain, and I learned about this tax hike this afternoon at 4:30. I'm not happy. I'm older. My husband is frail. If without his income, we couldn't make it right now. And he's not getting better, or maybe by a miracle he will. But I just would like to ask, I spoke to a couple people too in between when I found out and came in here, and they had no idea that this is going on. I think that you should have put this off and have the public forum so people can tell you how this is going to affect them. I also am really interested as to why you want to dig into my pocket again. What do you plan on doing with this money? Nobody has an answer?
We don't answer questions at this time. We're
You
here
don't
to
answer?
listen, to listen to your concerns.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, please don't vote on it tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to come forward at this time to address the board? Okay. Seeing no one else, then we'll go ahead and close public address. And our next item is to go into work session. And so we can discuss the proposed budget and the proposed tax rate. Is there a motion to go into into work session?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Kitts?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Jakowski?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Grafsky?
Aye.
Chair Biggs?
Aye.
7 ayes.
And maybe it would be helpful if there seemed to be some misunderstanding about the process and what all goes on. So maybe it would be helpful at this time to, I'm going to ask Ms. Hill to sort of explain, or if you want to assign someone else, the process that we go through, and then I will go ahead and tell you the other meetings that we have scheduled. Okay, so tonight, what we're discussing really is what we're advertising the proposed budget and tax rate to be. It's an advertisement, and we'll have meetings and a public hearing along the way to address all that. So Ms. Hill, would you like to sort of explain the process?
Sure, I can do that. As you know, the departments submitted their budget request to county administration, and then earlier this month, recommendation was presented to the board for the tax rate increase and budget. And as you said, tonight, we hope to have a vote on the advertised tax rate and advertised budget amount. And then on April 4th, assuming that that is approved, an advertisement is approved, then on April 4th, there will be a public hearing on those two items. And we'll have work sessions following those meetings as well.
Okay.
And then
Yeah.
Then
and
the
also-
plan would be on April the 15th.
Yes.
To vote on the tax rate and the budget at that time to approve the rates. So tonight is just to advertise the rates. And as we know, once you advertise the rate, you cannot approve a higher rate, but you can approve a lower rate.
Right. And then in between all of that, we'll be having a meeting on March 25th and April 18th, regular board meetings, and then Monday, April 15th is what Ms. Hill referenced as a time we'd like to make a decision. There's something else, though, that goes into this process, as you all probably know, and that is, trying to do all this with not knowing what the General Assembly, as some of you have referenced, and the governor might do. And I believe the General Assembly does not reconvene till April, is it 17th?
The governor is supposed to decide his position on the budget, I believe, by April the 7th. And then the General Assembly is slated to come back on the 17th of April.
And the reason that we're on the timeline that we're on, can you explain that about the books? And
Yes,
all that?
after there was a question about that or a comment. We do operate on a fiscal year that begins July 1st. However, tax tickets have to go out from the treasurer's office to collect the June 5th tax collection on real estate. And so in order to get those processed and taxpayers have adequate time to plan and prepare for that, we try to send those out about a month before the due date. And that's why the schedule is as presented. If there was a circumstance that we needed to not vote on April the 15th, we could defer that to the following meeting, which is April 22nd. It would be difficult to defer it much past that and still meet that schedule of having the tax tickets out a month ahead of time.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I think that's helpful for everyone to know. Okay, we'll go ahead and we'll start. We have the proposed budget listed first. So at this time, I'll go around to see if there are any questions or any other information folks want, that kind of thing. And let's start down with Supervisor Bone. Do you need anything else at this time?
Before we
Okay,
start
go
with that,
ahead.
we do have information that
Oh,
we're going to
good.
send to you
Okay.
tomorrow.
Oh.
It's not ready to submit to you this evening, but we're collecting a few more pieces of information in response to questions that you had last week. So we'll
Okay.
send that out in the morning.
Okay. All right. Do you have anything?
Yes, I'd like
go
to
ahead.
make I'd like to make a comment.
Okay.
Ms. Hill, could you tell us the last time we raised taxes in the county?
We have not Mark might have to help me. The rate was not increased at the last reassessment, which was last year, but the time before that, which was 4 years, it was held at the same rate. So in effect, there was a tax rate increase that year. What was it before that?
So we had a reassessment that went into effect January 1st of 2023. 4 years prior to that was January 1st of 2019. That was fiscal year 20's budget. The revenue neutral rate at that time was 83 cents, and we left the rate at 89 cents. So in effect, that was a 6-cent tax rate increase that year.
Okay, so since January 1st, well, really, the first payment was June,
Right.
correct?
Yes.
June of 2019, we had a 6-cent
Right.
increase. And then what's proposed today, for this year, is a 5-cent increase. So 5 plus 6 is 11. And the cost of inflation over that time has been approximately 20%. And so we're only asking for 5 cents. which is 35% of what we've experienced with inflation. I'd like people to understand that the county, without raising taxes for the last 5 years, we've squeezed as much as we can out of our budget, and at some point in time, we have to catch up with inflation also. Is that fair for us to catch up with inflation or not? So is everybody saying that no increased funding and too bad for the county government? I got it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Supervisor Kitts, do you have a question and follow-up?
So I'd ask questions. I saw a couple of things, and I'm trying to catch up with what I had. I put in a couple requests in advance, so I'm looking at you, Angie. So, because I sent them in the week before last, so that's part of what you got coming out tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to say this as we go through this, that nobody wants to be able to do this. Nobody wants to, but we got to understand that there's a balance between what we have to do, the responsibilities. But I know it's a burden to a lot of people. So, heavy is the head that wears the crown, kind of speak. So as we wade through this, don't think that we're not weighing both sides, that we look at this and make sure that we're doing this as judiciously as possible. So especially being my first time through, I've talked to several of you offline at different times. So you know how serious I take this and how much work I put into reading into it and making sure I know what's going on. So I kind of trust the process and what we're doing, and that's all I have.
Thank you. And Supervisor King?
So you got the answers, some of our questions will be coming out tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay.
We got some of the answers late today, and I wanted to send them all out to you at one time, so that's why we're going to
Okay. All right.
get them in a good format for you in the morning.
Appreciate that. But we're talking about the budget tonight, so, since I've been here, we've been increasing the budget by bringing in more businesses. We reassessment. That brings in more budget money. I think twice since I've been here, we've reassessed. So I just want us all to look at what's going on in the world today with people struggling. That's all I asked.
Okay, thank you. All right, Supervisor DeMonts.
I don't have any questions in terms of understanding the budget a little bit further. I did want to say a couple of things, especially in response to or in light of some of the citizen comments, and I appreciate clarifying kind of our process, that we're not voting on anything tonight besides to advertise to hold a public hearing. So I think it's good that we communicated that. I think it might be worth restating that we don't choose to do a reassessment. We are required to do a reassessment. And the maximum amount of time between reassessments is 4 years. So we could do it more often, but the max allowable time for us is every 4 years, which created quite the headaches last year just due to how on fire the real estate market had been for the preceding 4-year period. I also think that it's of value for this board to possibly look at the budget and see if there are items between now and making a final decision on April 15th. Are there items that we would want to cut from the budget? If we advertise at 75 cents, but we did decide eventually to go to 73 or 74, 72, something like that, each penny of the real estate tax is
$1.2 million.
So then we would need to cut $1.2 million for each penny that we would decide to bring down. Other than that, right now, on this topic, I don't really have anything else to add.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Grafsky.
I echo the sentiments of my colleagues up here, and I don't know that I have a whole lot else to add to that other than that We do take the input very seriously. We understand the implications of changing tax rates and how that affects individuals, families, businesses, things like that. And so we're going to be as judicious and as, I think, efficient as we can in arriving at a rate that is going to continue to help the county move in the direction that we need it to, and and try not to add too much fat to it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Fidzikowski.
I don't recall hearing where the extra revenue money came from. The last thing I remember is earlier in the year we had an update and it was going to be 4.5 million, but now it's 5.9 million.
Right.
So do we know where the extra 1.4?
Yes, I'll try to answer the question. If the numbers are not exactly right, Mark can help us. Part of that is coming from the interest rate. Shortly after we presented the preliminary revenue estimates to the board, the Federal Reserve came out and said that they were not going to cut rates as quickly as we thought they were. So we believed that we're going to get a higher rate for a little longer. So we added some dollars back for that we believe will be recurring. And then some additional work was done in the Commissioner of Revenue's office to look at supplements and abatements on personal property taxes, and so that rate or collection was adjusted as well. And I think real estate or sales tax, we got one more month of sales tax, which stayed very strong, so we added a little bit to that as well. Mark and I have been talking about the timing of when we bring information to you, and we have for many years, probably as long as both of us have been here, have brought preliminary revenue estimates to you very early in January. And we might look at revising that so that they are more solid when we bring them, that we can make sure that that we can get a little bit more information before we bring the preliminary estimates.
I know that in the past couple years, it seems like our revenue increases have been a little bit higher than what we were used to. Usually it was like 2 to 3 million increase. But now we see these bigger jumps, and I'm not sure if it's the reassessment playing into that or what that is, but 5.9 is considerably higher than 2 or 3, so I would like to see us work within that and accomplish what we need to do with this high amount of revenue that we're getting instead of raising the taxes. The other part is that we're waiting on the state again, and especially for the schools. If the state comes through with additional money for the schools, then I could see where we could cut that back as to what they need. Their increase, I believe, is 12 million
Right.
overall. Okay, yeah. I don't recall any other time that we've had a $12 million increase with the schools. Do we know what the last 2 years have been? Do we even have that? No.
Do you know that? Right. We'll get that for you again.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes.
Yeah, and I agree with a lot of the speakers. It's just, these are tough times we're going through. And I don't think we've even talked about the tax on mobile homes. Are we going to be discussing that now?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, like, we have it on the new business and to set the,
Is our mobile homes assessed at personal property rate, real estate rate? So
Yeah.
it's the same impact.
Yeah, and generally speaking, I think majority of people that live in or own mobile homes are usually on the lower end of the pay scale. So again, it's something else I'd like everybody to consider when we're setting that one. But I really would like to see us stay within our revenue that we've got. It's higher than normal. There should be a way to make that work. That's all I got.
okay. Does anyone else have a comment before? Supervisor Kitts?
Yeah, I had a question. So we said each penny is 1.2 million.
Yes.
So based on, let's say, median house prices for the areas, do you have that readily available, like what the increase would be per penny?
That's one of the items that we're going to send you tomorrow. We have a chart that shows what the median house value is in the county and then each town and what the impact will be. And also it shows for different just values of houses, so you can kind of plug in and see where a house might fall, what the monthly increase would be at different rate increases.
Okay, second part to that, and this was previous to me coming in, but I know it was brought up about the adjustment in the assessment time. I know it was discussed. I haven't heard anything since then. Supervisor DeMott's brought it up that we do every 4 years. I know it was discussed of 3, possibly 2. And have we gone any further? Because I haven't heard anything else beyond that.
We have not gone further with that. If the board wants to, we can certainly bring more information back to you or look at that. If we did that, the values would change more frequently, but it would also smooth out the impact of a reassessment.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Supervisor DeMott?
Just piggybacking off of that question, to one of the hurdles when we discussed it was if we assess more frequently, developing our own assessment team in-house, and what would that cost to staff a department to do an assessment? I think it was a worthwhile conversation and definitely something, worth continuing to have, but that was one of the bigger impacts. And if I may bring up a totally unrelated question, one of the speakers asked about bringing back the merchant's capital tax. What did that cut from the budget?
It was about $1.5 million.
So around a penny.
About a penny.
A little over a penny. And I don't think that that's a discussion that we can have as part of the budget discussion, but I think it's a good point to bring up and a good thing for us to at least be aware of, that cut about a penny from the budget.
Okay. Anyone else? Supervisor Bone?
So, Ms. Hill, throughout the budgeting process before it's presented to this board and the community, the process really hasn't changed over the years, right?
It has changed a little bit. The requests are submitted to Mark and the budget department, and they are evaluated there, and then they go to our leadership team, which is comprised of the directors for county departments and all the constitutional officers and the agency directors. And they're vetted there as well, and questions are asked, and then we decide what we're going to propose to the Board of Supervisors after that process. So the piece of the leadership team review has changed in the past few years. That has been added. We didn't do that in the past.
So like the last 3 years, it's been
Yes.
happening.
That's right.
Okay. And each of those 3 years, if someone had to describe the budget proposal, they would call it conservative. Is that true?
Yes, it is.
Would you continue to call this budget conservative?
I think it's financially responsible, fiscally responsible to present this to you, yes.
So not conservative, but fiscally responsible.
I'm not saying conservative because that has a political tone, so I'll say responsible. And not every request from the school that are presented to the school administration or to me are presented to you. We cut things out before they come to you, and we talk to our department heads about things that they don't even present. So we talk about how much gets brought forth to us, and we don't forward on to you. But there are things that people don't ask for because we have discussions before it even gets to that part about how could plans be worked into strategies for future years. So we do try to be very responsible in those areas and not ask for things that we don't need. I can't speak to the school side, of course, but that's the county's side.
You can say that you always try to be very responsible.
Yes, always try to be very responsible.
And I'd like to just make a comment about the reassessment discussions that we've had in the past. As Supervisor DeMott's mentioned, we would bring it in-house as a logical next step or choice that we had. But while we were having those discussions many months ago, we were also having the discussions about it's really hard to hire good people. And so for the time being, we pushed that out. At least that's what I remember from the discussion. So I appreciate people bringing that up, though. Thank you.
Anyone else? Go ahead.
Yeah, the reassessment, we had a presentation on that last year, so it would have been before our new members came on.
That's right. Would you like us to bring that back to you?
I think that would probably be a good idea to give them a copy of it.
Sure, we can do that.
Because there were positives and minuses on either way that we looked at it, so it is good to just look at that,
Right.
that presentation. I think you gave us all a copy of it.
Yes, I can. I think I did share that with the new members, I think, but I will make sure that they have a copy. And one thing that, just to bring up about the reassessment, is that the goal of the reassessment is to bring values into an equitable state so between each other, because different property values change at a different rate. So if that's not brought in line on a consistent basis, then some people's houses may have increased in value, but because we haven't had a reassessment, that value hasn't increased and so that changes the proportion between different houses in different parts of the county.
Okay, Supervisor DeMott.
I feel like I'm pulling us all over the place. So we had a presentation a couple of months ago from the 911 authority, and they had a significant financial need for upgrading radios. I know that that's not reflected in the budget, but when we get to the point where we're having to do that, where is that money? Where does that come from? How are we planning for that?
They have preliminary information back from the financial consultants about what the debt would look like, and they can structure the debt payment so that there won't be a debt payment in fiscal year 25, but it would have an impact on fiscal year 26. And we don't know the exact amount yet because we don't have the bids back. So it's a little too early to predict the amount, but it won't affect this year's budget. However, it would have to come from ongoing revenue sources, from taxes, or if some sort of tax, whether it's growth or an increase in the tax rate.
So it needs to come from regular income, not just one-time funds.
Right.
And then when we encumber, I guess when we take that debt on, does that affect the county's balance sheet or our, debt to income ratio, for lack of a better way of expressing it, or does that affect the 911 authorities?
It affects the 911 authorities. That's part of why the authority was formed in the manner that it was, and it went to the General Assembly to get a legal authority so that they can issue their own debt, and that will show up on their books, and then it will show as an operating expense for us over that time period.
Okay. Thank you. I brought that up as something that is a looming stressor.
That's right.
And not something that we're going to deal with this year. And I was hoping the answer would be it was at least one full budget year out.
Yes.
So thank you.
Anything else? Supervisor Kitts?
So, all right, here's my question on that one. Thank you so much for going down this rabbit hole. So I remember we spoke about our borrowing ability and whether the current rate affected our bond rating, and that at the current rate we had, that our borrowing ability was about 6.7, 6.8 million for the next 6 to 8 years, unless we changed revenue stream or sources. And does that affect, because I understand how, we're going to have to borrow money, or we're going to have to be so much on the hook, so to speak, for the 911 authority going forward, because they issue their own debt, but it says operating expense for us.
So the impact will be the same. We still have, there are two pieces. There's debt capacity, which is our ratios. It won't affect that at all. But then the affordability is the ability to pay the debt service, and that's the item that we have to make sure that there's a source of funds to pay the debt service. So if we're having an additional expense for the 911 authority, it would impact that amount of money that's available to pay for new debt for us. We would have to find the money from a different source or an
Okay.
additional source.
But also for any, let's say, any projects, we have any capital projects that come up, because the limit is 6.7, 6.8, somewhere in there, but the increased revenue projections would allow us to increase our borrowing ability in the event that there was an issue with a capital project or an emergency that came up. So that would increase our borrowing ability, correct?
With-
The limit, or so to speak.
Our yeah, it doesn't affect our capacity, but it would affect when we would have to pay the debt back. So
Okay.
the amount of money that we have to pay it off. Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Supervisor Boone?
Ms. Hill, when you proposed this budget, you knew about the $5+ million in surplus, right?
Surplus.
What revenue?
Additional
revenue?
revenue from the state for the schools?
No.
New revenue.
Oh, new revenue for the county?
Yes.
Yes, that's right. We did know about that. The piece we did not know at that time was what the General Assembly was going to do with the schools. We did not know how much additional funds might come through the General Assembly's budget, and of course, we don't know where that's going to land at this point.
And we might not know, like last year, until very late in the year.
Right.
But we can still adjust the tax rate lower.
We can only adjust the tax rate lower before the book is generated, which needs to be done either at the end of April or the very 1st of May in order to still get tax tickets out on time.
So we can't lower it like in October.
No, I just was confirming with my legal counsel over there. So what you could do.
But we could lower our taxes next year.
That's right. Here's a couple choices. If you didn't lower this is just hypothetical, but if you approved a 5-cent increase on the real estate rate and the General Assembly, after the time has passed, did provide more funding for schools, we would not have to appropriate the entire amount in June for July to go to the schools. The portion that would not be needed could go to one-time items, capital or that kind of thing, set aside in a reserve. And then next year, when we go through the budget process, you would either already have some capacity, kind of like we're talking about with the debt. We would have some funds that would either be available to spend, or you could lower the rate at that time.
Mm-hmm. So you knew about the $5+ million.
Yes.
Is that a good amount to have? Or is the $2 million that we're used to seeing a good amount to have?
It depends on what the needs are and how much funds you need to cover the needs. And in this case, we have more needs than are provided by that funding.
And so have we already addressed the $5+ million?
That's included in the budget.
In the budget.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Supervisor Kitts.
Sorry. So I was in the PSA meetings. We talked about, we know we've got some infrastructure issues going down to Shawsville and Elliston. We know that's coming up. We know that's a water issue for PSA, and we know we're going to have to play around with how we're going to get that funded too. I'm just saying, let's keep our options open on, so am I off base? Just
The county cannot pay for
Right.
PSA infrastructure projects.
CSA is separate.
Okay.
Completely separate.
Okay. Sorry, I got to flip.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's okay. Anyone else? Okay, well, Supervisor Kitts asked my question about the impact chart. I think that's always good to see, like, what would be the impact, so our citizens can see that too on the real estate. And on the new revenue, that tends to vary. We've been very lucky the last few years that we've had, a good source of new revenue, but it's hard to predict, what that's going to be each year. So that would be my comment there. But then to folks that are out in the audience or listen to this on our YouTube channel, I think just from the questions that were raised tonight, you can see that the members of this board are very caring and very reflective about asking the kinds of questions that need to be asked. And also, I would like to say that I know the staff has worked really hard. In this budget, as Ms. Hill stated, there are things that are not in here that didn't make it here. And this budget is available online. And I don't know, are there any printed copies out in the community if they want to see this?
There are copies in the libraries, I think in the town halls, in our building, the printed copies are available for people to look at.
Okay. Let me ask this. Now, under our work session, we have budget, and then, we would come out of work session and we would do new business and we would decide what we want to advertise our budget and our tax rate to be. Is there anything else that you all want to discuss during the work session that's related? Yes, Vice Chair Fidzikowski.
Yeah, if this is the proper time to discuss the rate on mobile homes,
Okay.
was that kind of baked into the budget also,
Yes, it's included.
keeping it or
It-
moving it to the same as real
Yes.
estate?
Yes.
Well, I would ask everybody to consider just leaving it alone, leaving it at the 70-cent rate.
Is that new this year?
It isn't new. The
No, it's
mobile
like-
homes are assessed at the same rate as real
Yeah,
estate.
they're assessed at the real estate rate, so the rate will be whatever the real estate rate is set at.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Can
don't
they
see
be-
that in the documents
Did
there.
you look under,
No, I mean,
It says mobile home,
mobile homes are treated legally as real estate, even though you can argue that they're personal property because they're mobile, but they are under state law taxed as real estate. And so when we tax it at the real estate rate, not personal property rate. And it's got to be the same rate. We only have one real estate rate.
Do they
Yeah.
take depreciation in? Because that's a
Yeah,
depreciable
well, I mean,
asset.
there's an assessed value that establishes how much their tax is based on the rate. Yeah.
but now individuals can choose to either make it personal property or
I don't think so. I think
personal property rate is much higher, but
it is, yeah, it's a lot higher.
value of the home had dropped, that might be a wash for them.
And I think the reason the state does the real estate rate is because it's much lower than the personal property rate.
Mark has more information.
Yeah, this is interesting because a mobile home, I'm assuming, Steve, are you talking about like where the homeowner owns the mobile home and the land it's on?
No, well, just the mobile home. Either one would be taxed at the real estate rate. Yeah.
Yeah, what I was going to say was, yes, the rate is the same, whether it's a mobile home or not. But one thing that you'll notice if you look at the mobile home values over time is they generally depreciate in value. So generally, that number drops each year. So there is some level of relief just in the fact that those houses tend to depreciate rather than appreciate, during that same time period.
Do they just look at those at reassessment time, though? Or
They are generally looked at, and there's an adjustment made at the reassessment time.
okay.
Thanks, Mark.
Does that raise any other, okay, Supervisor King?
That $5.9 million Steve was talking about, is that ongoing money?
Yes. We project it to be ongoing money.
That's new money for this cycle?
Yes.
Okay. So if we got 5.9 new money, I'm trying to figure out why we need to raise tax rate. I mean, we already got 5.9, and we don't know what the school's gonna have left over out of their budget from this cycle. Good question. I would just,
Please don't do that and show respect to the board members that are speaking. I think what Ms. Hill stated was that all of that was taken into account when they presented the budget, the new money and also the proposed tax rate is what she was saying. If that helps any, I don't know if that helps any, but
So if it 5.9 and you said it's for 1.2 million for every penny,
That's right.
so
5.9% is
So it's-
2% increase.
that's actually, help me out with them figures.
I don't have that number in my head. Do you, Mark? What the total,
So actually that'd be around 9 cents, right?
the 5.9 doesn't all come from real estate, but it would kind of,
With interest and all that.
it's got interest, it has sales tax, it has lots of different sources, not just
Right.
real estate.
But I mean, if we added that to, if the tax rate was raised to get 5.9,
Yes,
and then we added 5 cents, that'd actually be 8 to 9 cent, right?
right. Right.
okay, here
Well,
comes
here
Mark.
he comes.
Was the question, what is the 5.9%, or what the 5.9 million was over last year's general fund budget? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, if it's ongoing.
Okay, that would represent a 4.4% increase over the same revenue sources as last year.
How many real estate pennies is it?
Hang on. It's roughly 5.
But it's not just real estate.
No, it's not. I think it was just for comparative purposes.
Yeah, what I'm saying, though, that's new ongoing money.
So now we're half of inflation at that rate, if you add them both together.
If you add them both together, that's,
Half of
that'd be
inflation.
9 cent.
Right, half of inflation for the last 5 years.
When we send information to you tomorrow, I'm going to include the slide that we shared with you when we presented the budget to the board that shows what the new revenue is from the different sources and then what we're proposing to use that for, just as a recap of the items, that how that balances out.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, did that raise any other questions, comments, concerns? Okay, if there are no other comments or questions, then I'll entertain a motion to leave work session.
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second?
A roll call, please.
Mr. Kitts?
Aye.
Mr. King?
Aye.
Mr. Jakowski?
Aye.
Mr. Motts?
Aye.
Mr. Grafsky?
Aye.
Ms. Bone? Chair Biggs?
Aye.
7 ayes.
Okay, so now we're under new business, and our first item is to establish the advertised tax rates. Advertised, with the knowledge that you cannot increase, but you can decrease. Okay,
I make a motion to advertise 75 cents.
okay, the motion has been made to advertise 75 cents. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, any discussion?
Yes.
Okay, Supervisor King?
I would like to keep it where it's at. And for the ones that's been here for a while, look at our record. We built Montgomery County economy. We've done really well for the schools. Since I've been here, we have never cut anybody's budget. We have give everybody more money and more money every year, every year. I just think it's hard on the citizens right now, the way the economy is. Everything's going up, light bills, gas, rent. And you have to think also too, if this goes up, people renting, their rent's gonna go up too. Because somebody's gotta pay it. And it's not gonna be the landlords.
Okay. Any other board members? Okay, go ahead, Vice Chair Jakowski. I had to check to make sure, because you're always before me.
Yeah, I'm going to have to echo a lot of what my fellow supervisor said. I remember last year when those reassessments came in, and I think the average reassessment was a 30% increase. And the economy was going in the toilet. Prices were high, rents were high, everything was going up. And I thought at least the majority agreed that that was just not a good time to increase taxes on anybody. When you're going through hard times, it's time to kind of knuckle down and survive. So I would really like to see us keep what we've got and work with the 5.9 million.
Okay. Anyone else would like to comment? Yes, Supervisor Bone?
I think besides voting on the tax rate and the budget tonight, if we want to keep it where it is, those people who want to keep the tax rate where it is needs to come up with how many millions of dollars of cuts out of this budget.
Okay.
And count the 5.9. So what is the
1.2 times 5. 6.
6 million? So we have to cut $6 million out of the budget.
Okay, Vice Chair Fidzikowski.
I just want to respond to that. You say, if we want to keep the tax rate the same, then it's up, since I do, it's my responsibility to go ahead and find that money, right? Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly what we did
I'm
last
saying we
year.
have somebody that we pay to do that.
Well, yeah, we use
So
all
that's
the
what I
resources-
would do. I would kick it back to that person.
Well, we did that last year. And I would think that we would have to do that again this year.
Do what?
I think what she's referring to is that we sat here as a board and we had a work session where cuts were discussed by board members and then acted on after we came out.
What did we cut last year? We didn't cut nobody's
Ms.
budget.
Hill, can you talk about that discussion that we had? Because maybe we're talking about things that are not exactly the same.
The recommendation was reduced. The total budget, no one's total budget was reduced, but the recommendation was reduced.
That's
the
what they
recommend-
asked for.
Excuse me?
What was cut is what they asked for. I mean,
Yes,
nobody's
that's right.
budget was cut.
Right.
So the proposed budget was not approved
That's right.
because the proposed budget had increased
The propo-
revenue and expenses.
The proposed budget was reduced, but no one's ongoing budget was reduced. Everybody's ongoing budget had more dollars. I think that's the difference in what we're talking about. But the proposed budget was reduced.
Okay, so in this instance, if we can make sure we're on the same page, the proposed budget wouldn't be the same. Did we ask the county administration to eliminate anything from proposed budget?
Last year?
Yes.
We did sit, as the board did go through the different areas. We proposed some items for you, but then some of them you came up with yourselves.
And how much were we short after your recommendations?
I don't remember that.
Several millions of dollars, I remember.
It was millions of dollars.
Right. So are we on the same page or are we?
Yeah,
Okay. So we would have to come up with some, I would expect. But the first step is for the administration and staff to come up with some recommendations.
Right, that's correct.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion at this time? Are we? Supervisor Kitts, do you have something you'd like to say?
So I understand what both sides are coming from, because I understand that there's things that are going to have to be paid for, things that we can work with, and that we've got to be very judicious, I'm going to use the word again, with the money that we have. But I do think it would be irresponsible, because we're not talking about making it that. We're talking about leaving our options open for the next 30 days so citizens can come and talk to us and talk about the budget, talk about items, talk about things like that. I think it would be irresponsible to go low, but we still have the ability to go lower when we get to the final thing after we have a chance to listen to everybody. And that's where I'm at. I'm trying to balance this too, because there's things in there that I've expressed some concerns about, but I want to have my hands free to be able to work. While I'm not excited about it, but I understand that it's a need that has to be done, and I want to make sure that, because Steve's red right now, I just want to make sure his blood pressure comes down. So that, there's no button for that, but I want to make sure that I understand there's got to be a balance here, and I do, and I've got to represent the needs of my district and the needs of the county, and I think we're just doing this so we can go back and argue about it, and so people can go this and that, but I think we need to go where we're at now, and then we can bring it down as we look at programs and the need bears.
All right, Vice Chair Fidzikowski, what would you like to say?
I would just like to say that I think somebody said in the last 8 years we haven't had a tax increase. A 5-cent tax increase is what you do when you got to build a school that falls apart.
No, that was actually more.
I mean, like a catastrophic thing. So that's my point. Tax increases are always inevitable. And the last one I remember this board doing was before my time, was a 2-cent increase, and that had to do with setting money aside for school capital, which it desperately needed. But a 5-cent, a 2-cent, I don't think anybody here that spoke would like a 2-cent either, but it sure would be nicer than a 5-cent.
Supervisor Bone?
So what happened last year is we advertised net neutral, whatever we called it, revenue neutral rate. And then we came up with how we were going to cut. In essence, kind of tying your hands behind your back-ish, because we had to get to the bottom number, right? Versus what Supervisor Kitts is talking about is not limiting our options today, but going through the budget with a fine-tooth comb and seeing if we can take some money out of it. And hopefully I don't want to speak for you, but I heard that, and I agree, I don't want a tax increase either, but that's not what's proposed right now. And I don't have a solution yet, so I'm all for the 75 cents.
Okay, Supervisor Kitts?
So to Supervisor Fidzikowski's point, Bellevue Elementary, 1953. Christiansburg, 63. Gilbert Linkus, 1964. Harding, 1975. Margaret Beets, 1963. Shawsville, 1935. Christiansburg High, that one's being done, and Montgomery Central, 1935. So we're talking capital projects. We know we've got elementary schools coming up. Thank you so much for the softball pitch for that one. But we know it's coming up again, and I've talked to you offline about this. You know where my thoughts are on this. So, but if we're going to look at that, then we've got to look at the whole perspective. You talk capital projects, and that's my worry. My worry is capital projects and the ability to be able to fund them coming up in the future. That's why I've asked the schools for a 1, 3, 5, and 10 year when they come forward to the school board so we can talk about it. I want to be able to plan accordingly with capital projects. I want to be able to look and go, this is what your money's going to. This is how we're going to spend it. And capital projects, you're 150% right. And I 100% agree with you. That's where we got to look, and that's where we got to play it. And again, I said before I cut the mic off, I get animated, I use my hands. Sorry. So, but I just want to leave my options open on this. But again, I've talked to you about this, and we're not that far apart. So just again.
Anyone else? Supervisor DeMott?
On the subject of the capital projects as well, I was actually quite pleased to see the restoration of the half penny for county capital and the half penny for school capital to enable us to plan better for the future. So I was quite pleased to see those in the budget. That was one of the things that during the discussion we had last year, we actually cut out. So I'm happy to see those restored because as Supervisor Kitts was saying, we have some old schools that are, in a lot of cases, having capacity issues in our elementary schools. And so we are aware that we have a looming large problem to deal with.
Anyone else? Okay, I guess my comment would be, and you guys have heard this a lot, planning for the future involves longer range than just looking at each budget each year. And I think schools were mentioned, Supervisor DeMott's mentioned radios, and there's also going to be an increased need for EMS. So those are all things that you sort of keep up here and you're looking at for the future. So that would be what I would talk about, because you guys have heard that before. So any other discussion, or are we ready to vote? And the vote is to advertise the real estate property tax, advertise is the key word, at 75 cents. And that would also be the mobile home rate also. Okay. All right, so, Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Ms. Demotts?
Aye.
Mr. Grafsky?
Aye.
Mr. Bone? I'm sorry, Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Kitts?
Aye.
Mr. King?
No.
Mr. Fizikowski?
One of those nights, isn't
It
it?
is, it is.
My vote would be no.
Chair Biggs?
And mine would be yes.
At 5 ayes, 2 no.
And I just want to remind folks again that we have those meetings coming up where citizens can come and address us during public address. And also we have the special meeting on, it's April 4th, correct? No, April 15th. No.
April 4th is the public hearing, and April
4th,
15th.
And that's on a Thursday.
That's correct.
That's what I was trying to get at, because that's a
Thursday,
different
April
day.
4th.
Yeah, so please keep those in mind. Okay. All right. We've taken care of that. Do we need to now look at the proposed budget?
I'd like to make a motion to advertise the proposed budget.
Okay, and that proposed budget would be $254,600,000, is that correct?
$254,607,161.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Is
Say
there
it
a-
again.
$254,607,161.
Okay.
Second.
Second, any discussion on that? All right. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Mr. Fizikowski?
No.
Ms. Demotts?
Aye.
Mr. Grafsky?
Aye.
Ms. Bone?
Aye.
Mr. Kitts?
Aye.
Mr. King?
No.
Chair Biggs?
Aye.
5 ayes, 2 no.
All right, that takes care of our new business. That motion that we passed, should we go ahead and read the other tax categories there that were covered? The aircraft, the tangible personal.
You're not raising anything else, right?
We have to
Yeah,
do
so you don't
anything
have to
with
advertise.
Okay. All right. So with all of that being said, is there any other business that needs to come before the board tonight from board members?
I'd like to just mention one thing before we adjourn.
Uh-huh.
You know, there's a burn ban until 4 o'clock, but when the wind is blowing, please don't burn. We've had several brush fires.
Yeah, and we've had quite a lot of wind, so that's a good reminder, Supervisor King. Anything else? If there's nothing else, then we are officially adjourned. And thank everyone for coming tonight.